Hello everybody, what's up? It's Jared here from One Up Creative. Today we're going to be looking at my first park in Planet Coaster. See, when I first got Planet Coaster, the first thing I did was kind of hop in there and just straight away jump into creating my first park. So a lot of this was just me kind of getting the hang of how to create parks in Planet Coaster. So there's a lot of stuff that really isn't as good as it could be, and I used a lot of pre-made assets and stuff, but a lot of it was just kind of trying to figure out and test the waters of how to actually work the game, and I'm pretty happy with the turnout. So, without further ado, let's get into the park. This park is called Alpine Hills, and I basically took up most of the map, all except for this little area here in the Alpine themed area. So we're just going to kind of walk through it here bit by bit, and I will show you guys everything there is to see. Okay, so we're going to go ahead and get started here. I'm just going to start walking you guys through my park. So we're going to go through the entrance here. The first thing you see when you enter is to your left, you're going to see a little Planet Coaster food station. I tried to actually theme these after what a real park kind of feels like. So that's how I try to theme this, because a lot of people kind of go almost fantasy, like ideally what a park would really look like if you were going to go all in on designing a theme park. But in reality, they don't really design parks that way a lot of the time. So I tried to keep it a little bit more realistic with the way I design mine. So you'll see this little food place here on the left, and you'll see some people, going to get their treats there. And you can see where I was talking about where I'm kind of just learning how to play the game, because like my paths, they don't exactly line up perfectly or anything, but I'm just trying to figure out how to do everything the way I want it to. All right, so what you can see here is what the kind of view is, and you're greeted coming in this entrance by our gigantic drop tower. That's kind of the main feature of this section of the park. So something else you can see here, if you're looking through this entrance of the park, you kind of get a nice double feature. So you get the skyline of 3 different rides just looking through the entrance. So you get this ride here, and then you have my RMC ride there, and then you have my wooden coaster in the back there. So again, that's just kind of the way you have to think about stuff when you're trying to design rides. So of course you got to have these really open walkways and stuff, way more space than you actually need, just in case you get a surge and there is a ridiculous amount of people going through the park. So if we go back through the other entrance, there's actually, you can see the other way. And here it's a little bit different. So this way is actually, you get the view of these mountains. And that's because when you come through here, this is actually the entrance to a little side street, which you can see down there. So you kind of see that side street going towards the mountains, and that is actually a main part of the park, which we will get to. So we're going to go kind of in the order that I built things, just to kind of help things make sense in the way that I'm explaining them. So as some parks would be, what would make sense is that we have some of our offices and stuff more towards the front. So this would be like an office building, and then here you have a first aid building to keep those nice in towards the front of the park, so that all the management and everything can happen towards the front where the entrance is and whatnot. Of course, you got a bathroom nice and close to the front. And then you can see here we have the little gardening area, the little garden area here, where it surrounds the outside of our drop tower ride. Okay, let's try to speed things up a little bit more here. We don't want to be here all day. This is one of the first rides you encounter if you come in this way of the park. This is actually the subway. So you can see I designed it much like you'd see an actual subway, where it's kind of under these glass panels, still kind of open and in that kind of setup. But then we have the entrance to the subway there, where people get on, and the subway will take you all around the park. So you can see it kind of stringing through the park, and it actually comes around to this side of the park and comes up underground there. It's got two stops, this one and another one on the other side of the park, because the park's actually divided in two separate halves, which we'll get to the other half later on. What I want to do is I want to come over here and so I can point out another one of those vistas like I was telling you guys about, because you want these landmark views of the park. So I've got a few different ones, and this is one of them here. So if you're standing here against the water, you can kind of see a whole bunch of stuff going on. You've got the river walk on the right side here, and you've got the monorail and the coasters on the left, and then way in the background you can see one of the coasters in the second half of the park over there. So we're going to go ahead and continue here to the left, where we will see our first coaster. And we're going to ride all the coasters at the end of the video here. I just want to kind of keep things flowing, so we're not going to ride them right now. And I will also have separate videos out, maybe about each coaster, just kind of the ride through each coaster. This coaster is the one that I would say I put the most effort into, because it was actually the second coaster I developed. First one where I was really trying to design a really nice ride. So this one has a custom sign. It's called the Helixer. And again, my first adventure into custom signage for rides, so I didn't do the best of the job, but I think I did something pretty interesting. And you got the scenery all around here. And the ride is pretty simple, but it's pretty intense, and that was the goal, was to make something really unique. And all my rides I wanted to do really custom. So that's kind of how this ended up being the way that it is. And it's more like a traditional ride would be, where there actually is a lot more of just the ride and less scenery. So, a lot of the rides people design are like super intricate with the scenery and really heavily ingrained. And the reality is just that the real world is not that simple, and there's safety regulations and all this stuff that prevents them from putting scenery all too close together. You can still go pretty close with scenery, but the reality is just that not a lot of rides are designed that way. So that's not the way that I have done this ride here. But one of my favorite things about the Helixer is the view from the sign. So you can kind of see from both ways. You get this helix if you're looking at the sign from that way, but then if you're looking at it from this way, you get a really cool view of the lift hill. So both of those are pretty cool. We're going to ride that ride later on. So you can see here right where the Helixer is, the monorail is coming over top of the pathway, which I think gives a really cool look to see the monorail run alongside of the water here. But if we go alongside of the water, you can see here the helix. This is one of the landmarks of the park. You got this big double helix from the Helixer. And then the park splits in two right there. And right where the park splits in two, we have this go-kart track. So we'll go through this really quick. The go-kart track we call the Mountain Speedway because it is built right into the mountain. So we do have this little queue line here. Now, if it was a real park, the queue line would be a bit longer, but that's something I struggle with making lengthy queue lines. So it's just a short little racetrack that I think is really neat. So it comes up here and then it goes around this loop, and the loop is built right onto the side of the mountain, and they kind of chiseled out the rock so that the track comes underneath it, and then it goes around, goes over the entrance to the track and does another loop, kind of a almost a double figure eight. So it does a figure eight, but then it has this extra kind of helix in the figure eight, which makes it a really unique design. It's built right into the mountains and everything, which makes it kind of a fun little track. So we're going to go left next to our next coaster from our little split here. And this coaster is actually the first coaster I put into the park. It was my first coaster I ever really built in the game. And then I just kind of built the park around the coaster. So you can see we have a pathway that just kind of goes off and around here. So it kind of really goes into the bushes and kind of isolates the rider. That way, you really can't see before you're getting on the ride what you're getting into. And Then we have the entrance here, and I kept, again, this kind of open feel because a lot of entrances are kind of more open. You know, they always will have a roof on them, but they often don't have walls, or maybe they'll just have one wall. So that's kind of what I've went with a lot of my ride entrances, because that's the way I see it a lot more in real life. So this ride is called the Mountaineer. This was my first coaster. It is an RMC styled hybrid coaster. So has this large lift hill, and then the coaster itself is very low to the ground, and it kind of runs with the terrain. So, I just kind of built the ride how I think it would be really cool to see a ride, and then I just kind of built the terrain around the ride and made it really flow with that. So you can see it starts with this nice large first drop, and it goes into this inverted loop, which goes into a curve. That curve goes around the outside, comes back around here, and goes into this series of helixes. So you got a helix here, which goes around a curve and turns into another helix, which smooths into the end of the ride. Makes for a really fun ride. It's kind of fast-paced, and makes it really interesting to ride. So yeah, that is the Mountaineer. That's one of my favorite looking rides. It really just has the looks. I think RMC coasters in general just kind of have that look, which I think is really awesome. Next, we are going to go back to our little go-kart section, and we're going to go go right. So if you go right here, you can see we have this walkway area, and this is where a lot of my people are, because I do have 6,200 people in this park right now. We're going to get rid of this so we can see a little bit better. I got 6,200 people in this park right now. So this is kind of what an actual park would look like, 6,200 people for a day on a park is pretty good day. So this is kind of what that would look like. So we do have this little area here with some park picnic benches, because people are going to look for places to sit down and eat with their families and friends when they're coming to the park. So wherever you have open spaces is a great spot to put that seating, because it kind of breaks up the space, makes it feel less empty, while simultaneously giving guests a place to enjoy themselves. So then you can see the entrance there to the go-karts. We do have these little planters here in the street where we've planted some trees, and we have the monorail, of course, going over top of that. One of the things I need to do to this park is, because the monorail is going over the pathway here, it doesn't have any supports, which obviously is not realistic. The monorail should have some supports, so we're going to have to make some modifications so that will have placed in various places in the park. There, finally got that out. So we're going to skip off for a second, and we're going to go in the other direction. So right over there is where we came from, on the other side of the lake, and we're going to start walking down this side of the lake. So we're going to go back here to our main entrance area over here. So we got this little flyer ride. We got some more open space here by the entrance, but what we really want to focus on is, if you go towards this way, towards the lake, we do have this little wooden bridge. And this bridge actually leads us to the boardwalk area, which I really wanted to have in the park, because I think it's kind of a center point, like a main street, if you will, for the park, where all the best food and best kind of snacks and places are. So it's the lunchtime hangout, and kind of a center point placed venue for all of the food and drink and stuff like that. So if we walk down this pathway here, what you'll see is that you come along on your right side, you have some food and drink stands, and then this is actually an employee housing area, or an employee break room or whatnot. So that's just kind of tucked away right there in the center of the park. That way employees have a spot centrally located where they can go to take their breaks. We have an ATM tucked here on the side of a building, then more food and drink stands. Again, a lot of these are the pre-made buildings, because it was just kind of the whole goal of this was just to learn how to do a lot of the stuff in the park. So, I didn't spend a lot of time investing into building custom buildings. I did here and there, but it wasn't the central goal of what I was doing. Here we have kind of a little daytime show. You know, that's one of the things that the real parks will have, is because besides roller coasters, they'll also have shows that you're able to go and see. So this is kind of one of the built-in shows that they have in the game. Then I've gone ahead and placed some benches here where guests could come and watch the show at various times throughout the day whenever it was playing. So the boardwalk kind of splits in two here. On the left side here, you'll see we've got a whole bunch of benches going and picnic tables going along the water here, so you can have your lunch looking out over the lake, which I think is really cool. And if we back up just a little bit, back to the bridge before we miss this, you can actually see right here is this point of interest, and that is because this is our primary skyline for the park. You know, this is the one that you're supposed to stand at if you want the premier picture of what this park looks like. So you can see you have the beautiful lake right in front of you, and then you have the reflection of that with the monorail, and then you have the nice skyline of the Helixer with the Mountaineer in the background, and then of course the mountains way behind that, and that's kind of like the picturesque spot in the park. But going down this, you know, we have various places to grab some food, benches and trash cans everywhere. You know, having enough trash cans and enough places to sit is kind of the most important thing. So you've got these flower beds kind of connected into two parts, and all these places to grab some snacks, grab some food, and then you go over here on a picnic bench to have an eat. Right here we have these docks, which I have roped off. You know, obviously if you wanted to do like boat rides or something, you could offer boat rides through here and maybe set up a little stand where people could purchase tickets for the boat rides. But you know, that's not something I'm offering right now. But it is something, you know, if it was a real park, that could be offered there. Right here you can see we got some dumpsters there, and that actually alludes to a ride that you can see tucked away back there. But we will get to that later. So then we get back to where we were with all the people here at the general store. You know, this is one of the shops where you could pick up some stuff. Right here we just have like some drink stands and stuff. You know, if it was an actual shop, you'd be able to go inside and, you know, get your food that way. So if we walk down this kind of curved side of Main Street, we're going to get to our next coaster. And this coaster is actually it's a wooden coaster. So this coaster is the Horseback, and it's called the Horseback because it's a really big out and back wooden coaster, and it's got a really strong Western theme. So you can get on the coaster by getting in a line here, and you can see it's got a queue that goes up into these buildings here. So we're just gonna go up here in that way. And then you can see this is where you get on the ride. You know, it's all encased in this building. This is one of the very few enclosed buildings for a ride entrance that I have here in the park. You know, I've got this theming, kind of with the Western theme, the mine coaster, the wooden building and everything. And then here you have a very large wooden ride. This is probably one of the hardest rides for me to build because it's so long and so large that getting the timing and friction and right everything so where it's not super worn out and out of speed or too fast or too slow by the end of the coaster, you know, that was pretty difficult. But you can see it has this very large curving hill footprint, and then it goes into a really, really strong double helix. You know, this is basically the maximum bank that these rides can do. Because it's a real strong helix, and then it goes into these little hills which are really nice, and then the ride finishes out nice and smooth here towards the end. It goes into one more helix just to kind of excite things, and then it goes into your brake run right at the end. So that is the Horseback. That's one of my favorite rides in the park. They're all kind of my favorite rides, but I like this one because I love that out and back style. So we're going to move on next. Actually, we're going to jump back towards the entrance because we got to go down the part that I alluded to at first, which is what I built next, and that is actually kind of our carnival area. So the park I wanted to design like it has these different areas because that's something I don't see a lot. A lot of parks they'll locate similar items next to each other. So they'll put all their kids rides in a kiddie area. They'll put all their thrill rides in a thrill area. So you can see here, right while I still have the boardwalk in the background before I get too far away from that, I wanted to go ahead and put in a pirate-themed ride. So this is kind of right here where you could consider it to be the bay. Um, so I put in a nice pirate ship ride right on the water because it wouldn't have really worked if it wasn't over the water. So I kind of had to do it that way. We do have a merry-go-round, or I'm sorry, not a merry-go-round, the chair swing ride that I mentioned earlier. And then here, is kind of one of the center anchor points for the picturesque type things. You've got the Planet Coaster, which would be kind of a landmark logo for the park. You can see here, if I zoom out, this is kind of the look of our little street here, where there's some rides and stuff that you can ride. Of course, you've got your really large Ferris wheel, which again is a part of that big important skyline of the park. You got to have those big landmark rides that just kind of stand above the rest. We got a custom bathroom that I built here. And then we have another one of our rides, which is one of these flipping cube coasters. I don't really have a name for this one. And then we have, a couple other rides which aren't even named because they're just kind of thrill rides. And then it curves around here to go over the river. So the way that I designed this is you can see you've got these mountains, and that's kind of an important thing because if you can see, this is where the park kind of divides in two parts. So I wanted the park to be tiered so that it would have some landscape because obviously this is supposed to be Alpine, so it wouldn't make much sense if it was all on the same level. So the park is divided into two tiers. So you got this upper tier and the lower tier here. So the mountains kind of are where that tier is divided, and this pathway is what's running along the outer edge of that. We're going to go along here. Sorry if I'm moving my mouse too fast. I tend to get a little over energetic. So we have another place to eat right here. Just kind of another snacking area, and that snacking area is right by what is called the Sundial, which is more like your Delirium or Max Air type ride. Those are what Cedar Fair calls them. Really cool rides, really maximizes thrills, and the location allows it to kind of swing back and forth in between these buildings and in between the mountains. It's kind of nestled right in there. So next what we're going to do is we're going to go back into one of our coasters. And this coaster is actually a coaster designed to take advantage of the area surrounding it. So, around this area we have all these buildings that we put in our boardwalk area and are kind of our main street centered zone. So this ride kind of takes advantage of that, and it is just a really compact ride called the Backstreet Bypass, and it rides in between these buildings. So it's supposed to be kind of an action coaster. Uh, think like, I would say like a Fast and Furious or something like that. So you've got, it just weaves in between these buildings real low and close, and then it's got a couple of upside down parts in there. You got a heartline roll there, and then you've got this half loop into a corkscrew that it comes out of right at the entrance of the ride. It's a launched coaster, so it launches from right here and just shoots off straight away into it, and it only uses these single cars. So you got like 8 riders per car each round. Super fast, super quick ride, but it's one of the coolest in the park just because it's so like nestled perfectly into its location. Bypass there with a couple of cars, that light theming, and then it starts here in almost this warehouse looking piece. It's got this open feel here, again built in right on the bay. That is the Backstreet Bypass. Again, we're going to ride all the coasters towards the end. And then we've got our last coaster on the lower tier here. And you can see this one, I just used one of the default Planet Coaster signs because, again, it was not about building all this custom stuff. I tried to do one custom, one of everything. So I did some custom buildings, I did some custom entrances, did some custom signs. But, it was just kind of get a feel for how the parks go together. So this coaster here is called the Torque Tube because I never actually give it a name since the sign doesn't have a name. But this is also a launched coaster, and the reason I wanted to do the coaster the way I did it was because I wanted it to kind of avoid the whole chain lift hill. This is something that the Maverick in Cedar Point is, which is kind of what I was referencing for this ride. It's just a really low, fast ride with short trains with a lot of inversions, just kind of this quick but not high G-force ride, where it's just kind of taking you in all sorts of places without you really seeing what's going on. And you can see this one is built on mostly a bare mountain, which was intentional because a lot of the other mountains in this area have trees on them, so I wanted to do one that actually didn't have a whole lot of foliage on it. That was just kind of more bare, where you could see the raw landscape. So you can see one of the main features is it goes through this little tunnel, this rockscape tunnel, and then it does a whole bunch of other stuff and does a whole bunch of inversions and everything. So if we back up just a little bit, you can see one of our entrances to the upper tier, which actually goes through the mountain here, and you can see the supports for one of the rides, and then that is the entrance going to the upper tier. But we're not actually going to go that way. We're going to go to the main upper tier entrance. So this is the entrance to the upper tier of the park. You can see kind of splits off right here in between our last coaster we just looked at and our horseback. You can see the monorail is kind of going right up alongside of it here, kind of tucked away. But, it divides off right here and goes right along this pathway right by our Max Air type ride. And then we have this picturesque view of the entrance right here with these trees where you can get, a nice picture. You got a king coaster there walking around greeting people. But up here on the top, we have vista where people can stand off and look out. One of the higher points in the park where people can hang out with their friends and sit on a bench and eat a snack or something. But the pathway splits in two here. It goes around either side of the rock formation. Presumably when they designed the park, this was the easier way to get the path up because that's something to look at. You want to look at what's going to be the most efficient way to get the path built. And in this particular scenario, they saw it might be efficient and better looking if they split in two rather than trying to go straight up the middle on this part of the rock here. So that's what they did. They split it down the middle. You can see when you get to the top of the pathway, you have this little entrance to the garden lookout area, and then it goes into our upper tier. So this is the view of the upper tier. So if you look at the park, this is all the lower tier here, and the upper tier is this park. The lower tier obviously has a lot more stuff on it because it's designed to be different from the upper tier. The upper tier is kind of designed to be more of, it was first a resort and has kind of evolved into more of a park. So it's kind of like the resort part to the park and then kind of merged into one conglomerate of both. So the first thing you see when you come up here is you get to the top of the steps and you'll see a gigantic screen with a whole bunch of benches laid out. This is where they would show movies late at night. I was talking about a couple places where you can watch shows. This is the other one of those where people will sit down, and they'll play something on the screen where you can sit down and watch and enjoy the show. It'd be something really neat for people to go see. And, you got a projector here. Presumably that's a box where you keep the electronics, and this is where some stuff is stored. You got some lights, and there are speakers built in onto the posts up here so you'll be able to see super well and all that stuff. So we're going to go left next. We're going to go right around the back side of the screen here, and you can see there's a more places to grab some snacks, and you can kind of see going down the street to the right. There's going to be more of that coming up soon. But we're going to go this way first. Again, I use one of the built-in signs for this ride because that's just to kind of advertise the ride. And the way the parks would be designed is, even though this is not exactly where the entrance to the ride is, this is where you would leave any other items to come back to the entrance of the ride. So that's where you would put the sign in. That way people know as soon as they come up here, they can see that sign and they'll know exactly where to go to get on this coaster back here. So you go underneath the monorail. The monorail will come into its other station right there momentarily, but we're not going to go to that right now. What we're going to go to is the Nightcrawler, which is a swinging suspended coaster. This one I really loved because of the way it's designed. It's the nice thing about swinging coasters is just how they sweep through their track, and I really loved that about swinging coasters. It's a bummer they're not really made anymore, but that's what I wanted to be an anchor of this upper area, was this gigantic, super tall swinging coaster, which if you look is actually the tallest part in the tallest part of a coaster in the park. But you can see the Nightcrawler is designed to be rode at night. That was one of the main features I wanted with this ride, because I feel like something is so really just so cool about riding these swinging coasters at night. So that's something I wanted to make sure I could do with this ride. So it comes up this really tall hill, and then it goes straight away into this really long drop, which comes up into a beautiful helix. And then you just kind of swing through these hills. And, that's one of the things you do with these swinging coasters. You do a lot of helixes because that's where they feel they're most natural and they're most smooth. So just being able to swing through stuff like this is what makes this ride really fun. And of course, getting all that inertia off that initial drop is really awesome. Coming back around the other way, we're going to go down the right side of our movie screen now. So here you can see we've got a bumper cars, and you can see going along here, overlooking the lower tier, we have some more of these little kind of thrill rides. This is kind of our other half of that thrill ride section. So we had the street with some of the rides on it before, and this is the other half of that. So on the left side of going down this pathway here, we have some more places for eats and snacks, and we have more benches here kind of aligning the middle. And then of course we have our other rides here. So we have, one of these flipping things. I don't know what these are called, but we have a little merry-go-round in the center here, which I think is a really beautifully placed ride. It's kind of one of the center anchors here of this section. You can see if the way this section of park is designed, that's a really kind of just center hold of that area, which I think is really what grounds the whole area. So it's kind of open on all sides, and you can see the whole thing. And it's a double-tiered merry-go-round, which is something that's really unique. You got that. You got all these places to eat and enjoy. And then if you look over here before we go any further, you're going to see this little boardwalk area that goes up in here. And this is actually our second stop for the monorail. So you can see the train comes in here, and this is where it would stop, because this is actually the other entrance to the park. Now, I did not build the other pathway coming down here, but the reason why this is the second entrance to the park is because if you look over here, this is actually a resort. This is a big hotel where presumably guests would come and stay, and this is the way that those guests would get in the park. They would come in here and then go to the hotel. And then off down this way, if I wanted to, I'd build a parking lot and stuff on this side of the hotel, but I didn't want to do that because I didn't feel like it was super important to the park itself, and I wanted to kind of keep it grounded in park-related things. But they would come in this way, and there'd be the monorail here that could take them down to the other half of the park if they wanted to, or they could walk down the boardwalk over here and come to their hotel. So again, that building is one of the pre-built buildings, and so is this hotel, because I just wanted to kind of get those the experience of that stuff in. But it's there, and it kind of serves its purpose, and I really like the way that it looks in this particular map. So then we have a bridge that takes you from this resort area, guest of the park area. So, obviously, like, guests of the monorail would get on this side, and then resort stayers would get on this side. But there's nothing stopping either one from crossing the bridge if they wanted to, because you got to be in the park either way. Coming across the bridge, we have this kind of cup spinning ride. These are really more fair rides, so it's more for kids, more gentle, but it's kind of nestled in there in our little upper tier area. And then we come to our last coaster, which is kind of the most unique of all of them. This is actually an inverse impulse coaster called Alpulse. And the way that I wanted to do this ride isn't the way that it actually works in the game, unfortunately. So I kind of had to cheat it a little bit, which you guys will see. I wanted it to be just a straight circuit coaster, but impulse coasters actually aren't able to be straight circuit coasters. I had to kind of work around that. But the coaster itself is a launched coaster, like a few of the different ones are in this park. So you can see it has this completely enclosed, I wanted it to feel like a log cabin inside, so it's got a completely enclosed log cabin styled entranceway. Again, one of the only completely enclosed entrances in the game. But I kind of styled it so that it was as if someone was living in this cabin. They got their Jeep, they've got their supplies and everything out here, and then the ride is built going through the mountains here. So it's a white and brown ride, and it kind of goes through all these curves and goes through these helixes and comes up through here, and it ends the ride cutting right down here through the rocks, which I think is really neat. So that is the last coaster of the ride, which means that our park is essentially done, and you can check out the whole thing right here. So this is kind of a view of the whole park, and this is what I love doing whenever I come to this map. Is I love just opening this park and looking at the overall view of it. I think it's really got the looks, and it really feels like what a real park would feel like, and that's what I really wanted to grasp with the way that I designed this. Was I wanted it to feel like a real park. So the theming isn't too heavy, but there are things that are themed, and the layout is trying to both play off of what's a good layout, but also what's natural for an evolving park. Because when companies come and build parks, they don't just lay out the entire park in one go. The park's built over time, and they kind of work things in and take things out as time goes. And I wanted it to feel that way. So of course our coasters are kind of anchors in the park, but the park itself, there isn't like a coaster zone, and there isn't, these zones are kind of loosely based, but they're all there, because that's how kind of a natural park would have been built. So guys, that's it. What we're going to do next is we're going to just ride all the coasters. I'm actually just going to put those in separate recordings and just put them in this video for you guys to enjoy. But they will also be available as separate videos if you guys wanted to watch them separately. But I'm just going to record riding each coaster. I'll probably do a day and night recording for you guys. Thank you guys so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you did, please leave a like down below. Comment. Let me know what you thought of this park. Again, I'm not trying to be the best Planet Coaster park builder ever. My goal with this park was just kind of get the feel and enjoyment of what it's like to build a Planet Coaster park, and I think I accomplished that. If you guys did agree, please let me know down below, and if you didn't, please let me know why you did down below. And if you want to see more stuff like this one, don't forget to subscribe, because I make new stuff all the time, guys. Thanks, and enjoy the coasters.
Inaduro, may mapinda. 去的ค่ะ